This Film is Lit, the podcast where we finally settle the score on one simple question. Is the book really better than the movie? I'm Brian. I have a film degree, so I watch the movie, but don't read the book.
And I'm Katie. I have an English degree, so I do things the right way and read the book before we watch the movie.
Look, some of us are lazy, alright?
If by lazy you mean wrong.
Prepare to be wowed by our expertise and charm as we dissect all of your favorite film adaptations and decide whether the silver screen or the written word did it better. So turn it up, settle in, and get ready for spoilers, because guess what? This film is lit. A handsome leading man and his beautiful blonde companion do battle with dinosaurs. It's Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds, and this film is lit. That's right, welcome back to the 7th episode of This Film is Lit, the podcast where we talk about movies that are based on books, decide and answer the age-old question, is the book really better than the movie? On today's episode, we're talking about the 1963 classic, The Birds, which is in fact based on a book, a short story. By
Daphne du Maurier.
And the name of the short story is? Or does
The Birds.
The Birds, there you go. Straight to the point. So we gave you some fun facts and some background on the book and the movie last time, so we're going to kind of jump right into it. We're going to start with, was that in the book? Because we can't do Guess Who this week, and you're about to see why. For my first, was that in the book? Any of these characters?
No.
So, as you can tell, or as you're about to find out, it's a short story. Yeah. And it is very loosely, this movie is inspired by, I think you might say, or based upon kind of loosely. It basically
took the concept of, like, death birds attacking and put it into a whole new story. Yeah.
And I think we had mentioned, I might have mentioned that in last week's episode.
I think we probably talked about it.
I talked about how he basically just liked the idea and had the screenwriter take the idea of birds attacking. Yeah. And then write a whole screenplay, a whole new story and storyline around that idea.
I'm not even sure the screenwriter read the short story.
Just knew that birds attacked?
I feel like Hitchcock read it and then went to a screenwriter and was like, okay, so birds attack, go.
Well, then probably none of my other was that in the books are going to be in it. They're kind of generic, like, things that happen, so they maybe
possibly.
I tried, because I had a feeling it was going to be really different, so I tried to pick things that weren't, like, super specific. Yeah. Like, okay, because, like, there was a lot of stuff. And like I said, I had a feeling that, like, none of the characters were in the movie. That's why it was my first one. It's like, are any of these characters in the book? Is there any analog for any of these characters? Even to to an extent? Or is this story not even really that similar?
It's not even really similar. There's a young girl.
Okay, well, how about this? Let's do, before we move on to my other ones, can you give a brief synopsis of what happens in the book?
Okay, so
because most people have probably seen The Birds, most people will not have read the story. So,
in the short story, and it is very short. It's only like 40 pages long.
You read it in like an hour this afternoon.
Yeah, and actually, I can probably post it on our Facebook page. Yeah, I think I can find a PDF of it.
Is it public domain? No, it's not not that old, is it?
It's not that old.
Okay.
I don't think.
But it's just... All right, yeah. I mean, interesting. Yeah, because, you can knock it out real quick.
Yeah. So, in the short story, our main character is a farmhand who was in the war, the Second World War. This takes place, like, right afterwards. And his family. He has a wife and 2 children, little girl, little boy. There are some secondary characters, like the people on the farm that he works at. And it's a similar concept.
Where they're in a house.
Right, they're in a house and the birds are attacking the house. And it's kind of like them trying to, take measures to keep the birds out.
Yeah, so it's like the last 30 minutes of the movie, mostly.
Pretty much, yeah.
Is there anything beyond that in terms of, like, other, is there anything going on in the village? Is there a village? Is there anything like that? You know what I mean?
No.
Is there any other characters in that regard?
There's not any other story to it.
So here, I guess this is my question. Here, paint this picture. Book opens. How does it open? Like, what's happening in the first couple pages? Just roughly.
He's working on the farm. They're talking about how strange the weather has been. And he starts to see, like, the seagulls acting weird.
Okay.
I mean, the story jumps right into it.
And then, so it progresses from there pretty quickly to birds attacking.
Yes.
Let's get inside and fucking batten down the hatches or whatever.
More or less, yeah.
Interesting. Because that kind of covers probably the rest of my was that in the book. Here's a little one that could be potentially, and I'll adjust it slightly. Anybody in the book are there any birds in the house, like pet birds?
No, they don't have a pet bird.
I just wondered because originally my question was if the lovebirds thing was a thing. Mm-hmm. Once you said that, like, none of these characters, so I figured it would be if there was, it would be a different thing. But I thought maybe they had like a parakeet or something that wouldn't be that outlandish. I think what we're gonna have a lot of our conversation is towards the latter half when we start getting into just some more general discussion about the movie and the book. I'll ask this for it was that in the book. Well, no, there wasn't, because he said, I was going to say the schoolhouse scene.
There is a scene where the farmhand, his name is Nat in the book, where Nat picks up his daughter from school. But it's not the same as, like, they don't get bombarded by crows or anything. But
he just goes. So does anything happen at the school? Does he just go get his daughter from school?
Yeah, he just goes and gets her.
Okay. All right. I was just wondering, because that's like, and we'll talk about it later, but that's, such an iconic scene from the film that I was wondering if there was any inspiration from. At least there's a somewhat of a plot line where he goes to get his kid from school.
Like, it's a little small part of it. And then that happens before, like, the main onslaught of birds gets there.
Yeah.
So
well, that's how it happens in the movie too. I mean, to an extent. Okay. And then this last one, I know it's not in it. There's no gas station explosion.
No. Unfortunately.
I figured not, but I thought I'd ask. So yeah, I mean, I knew right from the get-go, from the first question, I was like, okay, I'm going to say, are any of these people in the book? You're going to say no, and then I'm like, well, that's pretty much going to be the end of that in the book, because the answer is going to be none of this is in the book.
There is one other small similarity, but it plays out really differently in the story in the movie. There is a scene where birds try to come down the chimney. In the story. But it goes really differently because their response to it is to throw kerosene on the fire and light the birds ablaze.
There you go. And they use that strategy, at least the fire strategy, later in the film. Yeah. But no kerosene involved. Well, it would have been tough for them to do the special effects if they had lit all those birds on fire as they flew into the house. I don't know how that would have worked. It might have been pretty tough. Which is one of the things that I thought was really interesting, is how well done all of the bird attack special effects are for 1963. And I was looking at some of it, like how they did it. And they used an interesting process called like yellow screening, basically, where they shot
like ye old green screen.
No, because they had blue screen at most films use blue screen for whatever reason. I'm not enough of I don't know the exact reasons why they use blue versus green. I'm sure there's specific reasons to do with lighting and that sort of thing. We're in TV. I work in TV. We use green to key things out because nobody wears that color green. I'm assuming there's a reason for blue. It has to do with how it's shot, I would imagine. I don't know. But no, they used something called yellow keying or yellow screening that had to do with the type of lights they used. They were like a sodium light or something weird. And then they shot two different things at the same time. It was very interesting. I didn't go. I want to watch a documentary about it, but because they had to use this special type of. They couldn't use blue screen, and the reason was because the bird's feather or wings flap so fast that if they used traditional like blue screen methods of the time, the wings would look really weird, like it wouldn't work right. So they had to use this special different type of keying to get the birds in there, and it looks really good. Like the scene in particular you're talking about where they all the birds fly, the finches fly down the chimney and into the living room, like is really convincing for 1963. But anyway, so yeah. What? Was that in the book? The answer is no. Pretty much. Other than birds attack. So in that case, we're going to move on to Lost in Translation. And I have one question.
Okay.
And I think I already know the answer, but it's all right because we can get into it. And this will kind of branch out to other places of theme and message. Is there any reason given for why the birds attack?
No.
Or even an allusion to a reason of why the birds attack?
There's kind of, sort of, because about halfway through, the main character realizes that they seem to be attacking when tide is out, I think.
Oh, okay.
And then they, retreat when the tide comes in.
So it is potentially related to the moon?
Yeah, it's, potentially related to, the moon or the tides or
well, the tides are based on the moon, so... Well, because they make a mention that it is the full moon in the movie
right.
when this happens.
And that's as close as we get to an explanation
of why, which that's, not the point, obviously. But, right. It kind of is. And I think... And that's when you get to the wider, message themes of the film. There's actually some fairly strong environmental themes in this movie to some extent. But that the idea that somebody later in the movie... what's her name? The scientist, the ornithologist. Oh, she has a line... Bitch. Yeah, that bitch. The ornithologist has a line along the lines of... it's not the birds that have trouble living with us. It's humans who cause all the trouble for, kind of implying that it's of our own doing that this is happening. And I think there's some other sort of implications and allegories to that, like with the gas station and the shots, the way and now maybe not, maybe I'm reading too much into it and it was just a cool shot of the gasoline running down the pavement, but that sort of thing. And this is also, keep in mind, sort of in the height of the nuclear program, to an extent, of the Cold War nuclear program. So there was a lot of stuff that we weren't sure, a lot of interesting, crazy, cool science going on that we didn't know exactly how it was going to turn out, and hence, But yeah, so I think there's sort of the because I think that's another interesting thing, or another theme of the film is sort of modernity versus. Or at least, I don't know if you got this, but to me, they were kind of opposing sort of the modern city living versus a more agrarian,
lifestyle,
pastoral, lifestyle, and because our city folk, invading the town, and bringing the trouble with them versus these good, down to earth people
salt of the earth, little
villagers, fishing town, They never had any problems before you outsiders Melanie came. Or not Melanie.
An idea expressed very clearly by the hysterical mother character.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the other thing I think. I mean, it even touches on hints of on themes of xenophobia and humans making this shit worse. Even if it wasn't our fault to begin with, the way the humans react in this situation ramps up, which is pretty much what all good disaster stories tend to do, is that humans are the real problem here, not whatever's actually happening. And not that stuff isn't a problem, but in zombie movie or when The Walking Dead, the problem isn't the zombies. It is, but it usually ends up being the other people they run into and the way other people react to being in this.
No, we make it a million times worse.
We make it a million times worse by, not paying attention and blowing up a gas station in the middle of town while we light our cigar casually as fucking gasoline laps against our feet.
Wouldn't he have smelled that?
He would have, and he would have seen... Just completely oblivious to the whole world
I know
around
it
him.
Looked like water on screen, but he would have been able to smell it.
Well, that's what gasoline looks like. It's just clear, but he absolutely would have been like, wow, that's really strong smell of gasoline. Maybe he's a nosmic like you, Katie.
Maybe.
How dare you?
Maybe.
You know his plight all too well.
They should have made that plot point clearer.
But yeah, that was my question for Lost in Translation. I had a feeling there wasn't going to be an explanation because I figured that, it's kind of the point. They don't really want to go into necessarily the reason we get especially in as contained of a story as the book sounds like it is,
right?
Where we're not, because on the at least in the, I don't know, maybe they do this in the book, in the movie, they have times where they're on the radio listening to people in San Francisco say, oh, there's this attack going on, scientists don't know why, or, we're trying to figure out we're still not really sure why this is happening and that sort of thing. So we get a little bit of that in the movie, and I don't know if we even get any of that.
There actually is some of that in the story. They turn on the radio at several points, and in the story, it's happening as far as they know everywhere.
Everywhere.
Because it's happening in London, too.
Oh, interesting.
And then at some point, they lose the radio signal. So...
See, that's interesting. I thought that was an interesting choice by in the movie to not have it happening everywhere.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I didn't expect that. I thought it was going to be happening everywhere.
It's interesting. I'm trying to think of what maybe the reason is for that. And I think part of it might be, is it scarier if it's only happening in this one little place? I guess maybe, because here's the thing. If it's happening everywhere, your viewer knows, like, here's the thing. I think if a moviegoer might think, if it's, birds are attacking the whole world everywhere, that's easy as a viewer to be like, that's not gonna happen. Maybe.
Sure,
a little easier than, well, it was this one weird random thing where this one town, like, it becomes more of like an urban legend that kind of feels real, you know what I mean? Versus like just every bird everywhere. And so I could see it being a more effectively scary for audiences to think it could happen in their town, their little town they live in, versus if the story was it's point. Happening everywhere. Maybe.
I think you can make a good case for either way being equally scary.
Right.
But
I'm just thinking that it might make it feel more believable and more real if it's just some weird freak occurrence that happened in one place that we don't know why, versus I don't know.
No, I can see that.
Yeah. All right, well, where are we going from Lost in Translation? Because all I have other than this is a bunch of notes about the movie.
Yeah, that's pretty much what I have.
I mean, do we have better in the book and better in the film?
I mean, they're so different.
Different, yeah.
They're completely different stories, aside from the basic concept. So... even more so than anything else we've ever done, it really is like comparing apples and oranges.
Yeah.
One thing I will say is that I kind of preferred that the story like jumped right into it and didn't have all of the like preamble.
Well, and we could talk about that. That's a good jumping off point. This will kind of get into general discussion, and we can maybe jump back into better in the book and better in the movie. But so that's one of the really interesting things about this film is how slow burn this movie is.
Yeah.
And I like it and I don't like it.
I was going to say, the thing is, I was thinking like partway through that like if I didn't know anything about this movie, if I knew nothing about it and I had never heard of it before and you sat me down to show it to me without telling me anything about it, and I didn't know what the title was, I would have been so bored.
That's fair.
For the first, like, hour.
I'm so glad we're having this discussion.
Like, I would have been sitting there asking myself, what is the point?
Yeah.
What is going to happen?
Yeah.
Is this literally just about Tippi Hedren pursuing a man in the strangest way possible?
Yeah.
Like, what is this?
Okay. Now, we talked about this a little bit in... the prequel to this, is that was on purpose. It was that through the marketing and the name of the movie, you know exactly what's going to happen.
Right.
So you're just sitting there for that first hour, like, when the fuck? Like that tension is building and that suspense is building, and it's kind of brilliant because even though it is kind of, I don't know, it is a little boring.
It is a little boring and a little tedious.
It's also not uninteresting. Like, it's like at least the character interactions are interesting. It's just, it's weird because I can see this going either way. I could see when you know it's called The Birds,
right,
and you know what's gonna happen, you're waiting. And so that's it. But I could also see if you had no idea.
Exactly.
It would, no, hold on. What? If you had no idea, it might blow your mind when, like, because, like, it's almost good enough of a movie. It's a little slow and a little boring, but movies tended, back in the day, you know, if you thought this was like a romance movie.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If that's what you, like, if you're sitting down, you're watching, like, oh, it's a romance movie. Like, if you didn't see the opening credits or whatever. And you see this kind of meet cute at the thing, and then, like, she goes to his house, you know, oh, it's a romance movie. Or the other note I wrote down is, like, if I had, because I also had this thought, if you had no idea what this movie was called or what it was about, and I just watched the first, when she meets him, and then I would assume that Mrs. Daniels was a Russian assassin there to murder Greg. Because, like, she meets him, and then, like, she, like...
Immediately begins
stalking him and gets a boat to go to his house and then breaks in. You're like, what is going on? But no, it's funny, because I could see it both ways. Like I said, when you know the birds are coming, the tension is there and building. Maybe they could have sped it up a little, but they hit you a couple times with some, you know,
right?
Bird.
Yeah,
and that's why I really can't decide if I think this would be more interesting if you had no idea what it was and just watched it. Like, if you could, maybe not for modern audiences, they might just get too bored. But like back in the day, where movies, like, if you were expecting a romantic movie, like if this movie was called like Lovebirds, no, for real. Doesn't that call it Lovebirds? Give it normal credits, and then show it to people. I would be really interested to see, and you could even, you know, that would be a really interesting, because that's the thing. A classic film class thing is to cut a trailer to a movie in a different style. Recut the Burbs trailer into a trailer called Lovebirds and make it a romantic comedy, and there's plenty of material in the, you know what I mean, in the first hour of this movie, or at least maybe not a romantic, you know, somewhat lighthearted romance movie, and then show that trailer to somebody and then cut off the opening credits and then show them the movie. Would be really interesting to me. It would be really interesting to me just to see what people's reactions to that. I
feel like Hitchcock might be resurrecting himself to make that
right. I feel like that would be incredible, because I almost think that's a more interesting experience than even what he said when he was like, or his idea of like, since you know the birds are coming, this tension building, and like that is true, and like I get it, and then once it hits that hour mark, which is one of my other notes. It is the last hour of this movie is some of the most suspenseful, edge of your seat, especially for the time. Yeah. Like, as soon as the scene starting at the schoolhouse, from there to the end of the movie is just like crazy. Like, it's just, you know, I mean, like, I still was, and I've seen it 2 or 3 times, just like, you know, in every minute, and it's not remotely boring for that last hour. Because it's just, everything is so executed so perfectly. Especially right at the schoolhouse scene, through the diner scene, through the explosion and them going back to their house. That, like, 30 minutes is some of the best, like, thriller, suspense, horror movie. In the way it's shot, the way the dialogue goes. That diner scene with after the school attack is... that dialogue in that scene is so natural and so interesting. The way people keep interrupting, and then like the guy that they keep calling back orders for food, and even the orders for food are like jokes where it's like the people are ordering fried chicken and Bloody Marys and like just like little stuff like that. It was really interesting. Anyways, I'm glad you said that about the it being it is a little boring. It's a little boring, but it's also interesting. I don't know. It's different. Yeah.
I mean, man, if you did try to fool people like that, you would have to keep such a tight lid on your advertising.
Yeah. Whew. Yeah, I don't know. You couldn't do it today. I think you could have done it in 1963 without the internet.
I mean, okay. When Frozen came out.
Okay.
There's that twist at the end of Frozen where the guy that you think is the prince turns out to be a bad guy.
Right.
And, I mean, obviously once people started going to see it and, like, talking about it, that didn't work anymore. But they kept a pretty tight lid on it.
Yeah, there's stuff like that. Yeah. And no, you're right. Yeah, I mean, in the sense that as soon as people started to go see it, word of mouth would have instantly been everywhere. And people would have been like, Well, yeah, it would have ruined it immediately. But those first weekend
wave of
would have been
viewers.
in for a fucking just the weirdest movie-going experience of their entire lives. And it's so, man, I just wish that was possible. Like, we need to find some people who've never seen The Birds, don't even know what it is. Oh, gosh, and then I can re-edit the Lovebirds trailer, cut off the credits to The Birds.
And then we'll show them the movie.
Show them the movie. Just see how they react. That would be so much fun.
I don't know anyone who doesn't know what The Birds is.
I don't either, but... Some other general discussion stuff. You know what's interesting to me, especially in light of what we know of Hitchcock now, or at least the stories that have come out about him. He did tend to, they're always blonde and beautiful, but he did tend to write, at least to some extent, for the time, relatively self-possessed, dynamic female leads that weren't at least one-dimensional. Now, they become a little, like in the second half of this movie, Miss Daniel, what is her name? Melanie?
Melanie.
Yeah. Becomes just like a useless mess.
Yeah.
Like in the second half. But in that first opening and the first bit of her, she's actually a rather interesting...
Yeah, she's kind of interesting.
Dynamic character that's not just, she's smart and she's funny and she's not just like there.
Yeah. Although I'm a little upset that we never find out, I don't think, what the practical joke is.
Which practical joke?
So at the beginning of the movie.
Yeah.
When
in court? That she's in court for or whatever?
Yeah.
She probably killed somebody. What a joke.
Like, they talk about her jumping in the fountain in Rome later, but I assume that would not be what she was in court for in America.
No.
So...
Yeah, I know. That's just the setup for her being a jokester, I guess. I
guess.
That's one of her big character things is she likes practical jokes.
I don't know. Like, that first half hour or so, I was like, what is this story?
Yeah, it's really weird. It's really weird.
She's a practical joker, and he came to teach her a lesson, but now she's chasing him across the countryside to give him birds.
Yeah. Yeah, well, no, he came to get birds, and then saw her, and decided to mess with her.
Okay.
But he was there to get birds. It wasn't like he came just to mess with her, because he didn't know she was there.
I wasn't sure.
Yeah, no, he just went there. He went there to get birds, and then... saw her there and then decided to mess with her, and then she became smitten with him, and so
because he was so suave tossing his hat atop that bird to catch it.
Yes, exactly. And then so she decided to get the birds and take them,
and be really weird about it.
Real fucking weird and creepy about it. And then I love that scene where after he finds the birds and then he runs outside to use his incredibly powerful binoculars that give him basically they give him the camera shot of her that we're seeing in his binoculars. And now she's not that far away, but it was pretty funny. And then he smiles giantly, and I'm like, no,
he's positively delighted to have been stalked.
Yes. It was the 60s. When a beautiful blonde woman stalks you, you just smile.
I liked the part where his neighbor across the hall reveals where he lives and everything about him to a complete stranger.
The old yesteryear. Yeah. Oh.
Hey, thanks, neighbor.
Of course. Yeah, he's out of town all weekend. Where? Well, let me give you his exact address so you can find him. And again, but that's also maybe some of the casual sexism of the time. Maybe, to an extent, a beautiful blonde woman. There's no way she could.
Definitely not.
You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, if it was some guy, he probably would. He might. I mean, who knows? Maybe he would have. But I'd say he'd be more than less likely to he'd probably be like, so why do you want to know? But when it's a beautiful blonde woman, he's like, I'm doing this guy a favor. You can find him right here. By the way, I wanted to note that I was almost exactly to the minute right in my prediction last episode when the first bird attack happens. I said, I think it happens like 30 minutes in when she's on the boat, and it happens like 27 minutes in when she's on the boat. And I was like,
and I think like about 2 minutes before I asked you when we were going to see some birds.
Yeah, and I was like, wait for it. We're right there. A funny thing you pointed out in that first part was that all of the women
are rightfully suspicious.
They're all like, this bitch. What's up with, what is her deal? Exactly. And all the guys are like, oh, that old lady, oh, so nice. Of course we'll get you a boat and tell you exactly where he lives. That house, see, right, that one, right there. And then, all the women are like, what is your deal?
Except for the little girl who has, like, no concept of strangers or filter or anything.
Well, she bought her birds, so she's got to be great. You get much in the way of themes or sort of messages from the short story? Does it seem to be similar to what I was discussing with what I get kind of vaguely from the movie?
No, I didn't really feel like that was present.
Well, because there are no outsiders coming in. Right. So that kind of limits that.
Yeah. I wouldn't say that there was a message in the story, but the thing that was interesting about it was that it was very clearly like an allegory for like the bombing raids that they had over in England in the Second World War, like the London Blitz and all that. Like it's very, very clearly, when you read it, an allegory for that.
That's very interesting, because that's something I didn't even think about with this, which totally makes sense, a similar type of thing. Because, I mean, it's more post-war, but it's still Cold War, and they were dealing with the sirens go off, everybody run inside and hide under... hide under your desk when the nuke goes off, or the atom bomb goes off. Yeah. But that's really interesting. I think another thing that you could potentially just spitballing, because it's also kind of a message theme in the book, is just sort of the futility in humans trying to wrangle nature. Yeah. You know what I mean? Which tends to be, on a lot of these type of stories, that tends to be one of the sort of overarching themes, is that it's ultimately futile for us. And I don't know, you say they're farmers in this?
Yeah, they're farmers, and I didn't...
So they're not like...
I didn't get that so much.
Yeah.
But another kind of interesting thing, maybe a message, was that, like, so our main character, Nat, he's a veteran, and he was in the Second World War, and he's, like, the only one that takes it seriously.
Yeah.
So maybe some kind of message there. Like, pretty much everybody else, when the attacks kind of start happening, like, it's really small at first.
Yeah.
And everybody else is like, we're gonna grab our guns and go shoot up some birds.
Yeah.
It's gonna be so much fun.
Yeah.
And then they all die.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting, because there's definitely some of that in the movie as well, where there's a lot of the people initially aren't remote, like the cop or the sheriff or whatever doesn't remotely take it seriously. Yeah. It's like, and even in after like the school attack, like the ornithologist is like, nah, it doesn't make any sense. They just saw fish on you, or like with the guy who said I got attacked on my boat, the captain or whatever. She's like, nah, they just going after the fish, and she doesn't really believe Mel that the crows attacked all the...
She made me angry. I wanted her to get attacked by birds.
She doesn't get attacked by birds.
I was really disappointed.
But she does learn real quick how wrong she was, because she ends up hiding in the back of the restaurant, after everything goes batshit crazy.
Bird shit crazy?
Bird shit crazy. Good call. I also thought there was some, and I didn't really mention this before, that there was potentially some themes based on the younger generation versus the older generation to an extent. Okay. And I think that comes through a little bit more with Mitch. His mom, and her fear of being abandoned.
Yeah.
And then the younger... And that was actually one of the things I read online, which was an interesting take. I think it's on the Wikipedia article when I was going through it, is that either a film critic or somebody, film theorist, talked about this movie and saw it as a representation of the many facets of womanhood. Okay. Females, mainly represented in his mother, Kathy, and then Mel and the teacher as being, the ex-lover, his current lover, the mother, and then the younger, sort of the innocence of the younger. I don't know. I'd be interested to read that article or whatever whatever may be critique of the story, because that was an interesting angle that I didn't really pay attention to in the movie and didn't really look a lot for. But I could see there are definitely elements of it with how they all react to the situation in different ways. Which is one of the things that really bothered me in the last half of the movie, is how useless they all are. And now I know it's 1963, but it got to the point where it felt a little unbelievable, where they're just like, especially Melanie, who wasn't completely useless the first half of the movie. Yeah. Like, she was like going to get the kids and like, doing things. Yeah. And then in the last half, she's just like literally like rolling around on the wall. Like, some of those reactions feel a little, and I don't know, but like the moment when she's in the phone booth, and those moments when she's like at the end where she's like writhing and rolling on the wall, like moaning, I'm like, what? This feels really not believable.
I think the first half of the movie, Mel could have gotten herself out of that room.
Yeah. And that too, and that was when she gets in that room and then she gets attacked and she just sits there and I'm like, and just waves her hands around.
Wouldn't have gone in the room,
or would have opened it and then immediately peeked in and immediately shut the door.
Because that would have been my reaction. No,
and like maybe there's some sort of I have to think, or maybe there's some sort of symbolism in that I'm missing. And like her all of a sudden just completely becoming useless in the second half.
Maybe she's just supposed to be traumatized.
But to be fair, maybe that's it, because because she does definitely have some vague form of like PTSD after she gets attacked in the room. Yeah, she's like, and I don't know how quickly PTSD is a thing, but like she immediately wakes up and is like fighting the birds, and then like is kind of like shell shocked for the rest of the film. Yeah. But what is interesting, that there is a switch in the middle of that movie where in the first half or early on, his mom is pretty useless in a lot of the scenarios and really scared and not able to do anything. And then it sort of switches, and then she starts helping take care. Like she goes up and helps Mitch get what's her name out of the room, and then she also takes care of her and gets all the stuff and like is like bandaging her and that sort of thing, and then it's like they decide to leave, so it kind of switches, and she kind of gains more agency. My favorite word. That's not the right word in the situation, but she becomes stronger in that, and towards the end of the film, and sort of takes over for Mel in a sense, in terms of like not being useless.
And there's probably a way to tie that to her thing about being abandoned and the dad dying and her not liking Annie, the school teacher. The school teacher,
yeah, and then I think
whatever went on between them.
Yeah, and then maybe that has to do with once she basically realizes, or the discussion is that they're not going to abandon her. Yeah, that she decides to switch it on and becomes more motherly and protective of her. And then the other note I had is that guy's face reminds me of Robin Williams. In one particular scene, in the final scene, when he's walking out of the house to go get the car, when he opens the door and walks out, the way his face looks and the way he moves it, something about the way his face moves and looks in that scene reminded me so much of Robin Williams.
How long do we have that rental for? Because I feel like I need to see that
I can go back. I mean, it's probably that scene's probably on YouTube as well. But I'll show it to you. Something about it, very much like literally the scene right when it was the only time I noticed it. There was something, and maybe it's this very specific scene of Robin Williams that I'm thinking of that it's tied to. But like when he opens that door to go get the car and he slides out and he's looking at all the birds and then they cut to his face. I don't know. Something about it. I was like, God, he looks like Robin Williams. It was weird. It was a very distinct, interesting feeling I had. But we have some better in the book or better in the movie? Anything? Can we get to? Is there anything? I know they're so different, but is there some general?
I mean, my general thing is that I kind of prefer the story without all of the extra setup and, like, other plot.
Mm-hmm.
God, they really are just two very different things.
Yeah.
And I totally get why there's extra stuff for the movie. Although I will say that I would be interested to see this adapted more faithfully.
Yeah.
I think it would be like a really interesting, I can't think of the right word for it, a capsule story or like a bottle episode.
Yeah.
Because it all pretty much takes place in in their house.
In one house.
For the most part. They go down to the farm once to get some supplies, but it kind of made me think of, while I was reading it made me think of Signs.
Yeah.
The movie.
Yeah. Well, M. Night is very inspired by Alfred Hitchcock.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of his stuff is very similar. The Happening is basically The Birds, but with it's
plants.
Basically exactly The Birds, but with plants. And if you haven't seen Good, Better, Baby, it has an episode on The Happening. I think it's like episode 15. But yeah, no, it's, yeah. And Signs has some similarities to some of this. There's a lot of his stuff. He was very clearly inspired by a lot of the sort of thriller.
Yeah, but I think it would be a really cool, like, kind of enclosed horror movie.
Yeah.
With the right director.
Yeah. And you could, because it might even be a good short film. Or you would have to expand a lot on what was going on within the house. Like, you would have to have more interesting dynamics going on in the house if you wanted to draw it out over a whole hour, which is kind of what this is, but it's mostly set up to get us to that. But, like, if you did that, if you had it be, there would have to be, what you could do would be interesting, an interesting idea. It's kind of like Clue, not really like Clue, but like where it gets right into it, and you don't really know who these characters are or their relationships, but over the course of this thing, you figure out what the dynamics of the different characters are. And I think if you added something like that, could be interesting. Because otherwise, I think it might sound like it might be better as like a short film or something. Where it would be hard if there's not really any interesting character dynamics going on between the people. If it's literally just survival, what's going on, birds. Like, that you can do that, but like that's kind of what this movie is. Yeah. I mean, barring all the other stuff, the setup and all that stuff. That's kind of like what the last 30 minutes of this movie are. I think you could do a unique and different.
And
There's probably a movie like that that's just not birds.
Well, we talked about it in the mini episode last week, but BBC is doing
a mini-series, right?
Yeah, an adaptation of the story.
I wonder how many parts it's going to be.
I don't know.
Yeah.
But I think they're modernizing it too, so I'm not sure like what direction they're going to take it. But it's something that I might be interested to watch.
Yeah, I'd be interested to see what they do with it, because they could go a lot. Because the thing with such a bare bones sort of premise,
right?
You can do anything.
Yeah,
you want
can
with
impose a lot of different stuff on it.
And you can, and again, there's so many movies that are the same thing that just aren't. I mean, it sounds like George Romero's original zombie film, the zombie film that started them all, which came out in 1968 and I've sadly never seen, is Night of the Living Dead. And the premise of that, and this is just from what I know of the film, is basically a bunch of strangers barricade themselves in a house when zombies attack.
Okay.
And so it only came out a few years after The Birds. So you can do that same story with lots of different things. Yeah. And now I don't know exactly where. I know the sort of modernly accepted interpretation of Night of the Living Dead is it's about racism and race relations and that sort of thing at the time. But so you can explore that idea of people hiding from a thing in a place together in lots of different ways. There's also a really supposed The Mist, I think it is. It's supposed to be really good. I'm not. See, I don't really watch horror movies, so that's like my biggest gap in like film knowledge is like horror films, and like it's just not normally my thing. I don't dislike horror movies a lot of times. It's just not. I don't usually go out of my way to go watch horror films, so a lot of times I haven't seen those. But I think it'd be interesting to see what the BBC does with it, because they could do anything with it. Yeah, literally anything. It could be like this weird, huge, like not political, but like a science. You could do like an Outbreak style, like science thriller, like, figure out what's going on thing. That could be where they go.
You could do like an apocalyptic. It could be like The Walking Dead with birds, kind of a thing.
Yeah, or you could do a really dialed back a handful. It could be like a 2 or 3 part miniseries where it's like a bunch of people in one place getting attacked, and then like what's going on.
Yeah.
Before we get to the final verdict, I have one more thing I want to talk about, and it's just the thing that I think makes this movie. And I kind of touched on it earlier when I said that the part from the school. Basically to the end, but the school scene is the scene of the movie. It's the scene where that's the thing that everybody that saw the movie went out and said, "Oh my God, you have to go see." To me, I feel like that's probably what it was, because the way that's shot and the sound editing and everything about how that scene builds is like the masterclass in tension and suspense building and like creepiness.
Yeah.
Like when she sits on the bench and she starts smoking the cigarette, and you see like a crow land behind her, and the kids, you can kind of hear the kids singing that weird repetitive song.
Weird song.
That really weird, creepy, repetitive song.
They sing forever.
They sing it forever. And then, and it cuts back, and just the way it's edited, the way it's paced. And then the final reveal as she looks up and watches that crow fly over, because she hasn't seen any of the ones behind her. And even if you've never seen this movie, I feel like and that's what's so magical. You see, I think at most, when we cut back a few times, we see like 6 or 7, maybe 10 behind her. But then when she looks up and sees and following that last one, I almost guarantee everybody who has never, and I don't know if you felt this way, but like, that what's going to happen is that, and probably partially because a lot of people who see it nowadays have seen that, even a picture of that scene, or still of that scene with all the crows sitting on the playground. But you just know, and you're just like, oh no. And then it lands, and there's like hundreds of them. It's just masterful. It's just like, it's so good. And I feel like that is like the scene where everybody was like, yeah, gotta go see this movie. This is like, it probably blew people's mind in 1963. I gotta imagine. And then because then the result of that is fucking a bunch of children getting almost murdered to death by birds, which is like
running down the street screaming.
Yeah, no, it's fucking ballsy. It's interesting. All right, let's get on to it. The final verdict, Katie. I know this is going to be tough because they're not really even remotely the same thing.
Yeah, they're really not.
But you still have to give a verdict.
I'm going to go with the movie.
Okay.
I think this was a concept that needed visuals.
Yeah.
So I think the medium of film serves it well.
Yeah.
Despite the beginning of the movie being a little on the slow side.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go ahead and give it to the movie, but I think that the story is not far behind, if even equal to, for different reasons. Yeah. I really enjoyed her writing style.
Yeah.
So
is that the first thing you've read?
Yeah, that's the first thing I've ever read by her. Daphne du Maurier, and I wouldn't be surprised if we do more of her adaptations on here.
Chalk that one up to the movie. It's another one on the scoreboard. I believe it's like 3 to. Let's see. This is 7, so I think it's like 4 to 3 books right now. Probably. Yeah. I think that's right. Well, which would be the movies that won? Princess Bride, this.
Arrival.
And Arrival. I think that's it.
Yeah.
So, 4 to 3 books. But, back to your point, on Daphne du Maurier, I watched the My Cousin Rachel trailer. It looks interesting.
Yeah.
It got mediocre reviews, but it looks really interesting. And I bet that's because, I don't know, like the trailer cut it as sold it as a mystery thriller, kind of, which I guess is probably what it kind of is. The woman, by the way, the dark-haired woman, is Rachel Weisz.
Okay.
Who I know mainly from my favorite movie of all time, The Mummy, starring Brendan Fraser. It's not my favorite movie of all time, but it is one of my favorite movies of all time. Yeah, she plays Brendan Fraser's wife. Well, in the first one, love interest. Yeah, the librarian.
Evie. That's her name.
Yes, Evie, and I can't remember her last name. I am a librarian. Love that movie. The trailer was a little confusing. I was a little confused by the trailer, but it looks interesting. And I wouldn't mind doing that because I think it looks like an interesting movie. I think the trailer gives away way too much. It looked like because I was kind of like getting towards the end. I'm like, oh well, you just told me what happens here. All right.
Well, I don't know much about the story, but I think it might be one of those dramatic irony things where the viewer knows more than the characters do.
Well, that's for sure at least the vibe I was getting, because I was like, it seems like you're spelling out everything. But even still, even if that's the case, I feel like the trailer shouldn't give away. Well, any trailers are bad at that now. But like, I was like, man, I feel like you're telling me the whole movie here.
Gotta get bodies in seats, babe.
I know, but it looks interesting still. I'd be interested to watch it and see if they did give away the whole movie.
Yeah, because I really liked her writing style. It was really spare.
Yeah.
And kind of utilitarian, but really creepy.
Well, maybe that's what she does. Even though she's plagiarizing all this shit, she brings her own unique style to the plagiarism. Maybe.
I mean... It's not the idea, it's the way you execute it.
No, that is true. And that is, to be fair, I mean, especially with something like The Birds, as we were discussing before, with such a generic animals attack storyline, like... Yeah, you could say it was plagiarized, the idea was plagiarized, which it sounds like it was. It sounds like it was. But again, it's so generic that it's the way you do it is... It's the thing that makes it. Now, I don't know whatever the one it's supposedly plagiarized from. Maybe it's literally like the exact same story beats or something like that. I don't know. We haven't read
I think the
successor
the other
or whatever
thing is
there was.
A novel. So I don't know. I might be interested to look into that.
Maybe that's the story of The Birds. maybe like the screenplay is like pulled from that one. But anyway, so yeah, we'll definitely be doing some more Daphne du Maurier in the future. But for this one, the film beat out the book or the short story just barely, but they're very different. Keep that in mind.
But go read the short story anyway, because it was really good.
And you can read it in an hour because it's very short. So until next time, guys, keep watching movies, keep reading books, and keep checking us out on Facebook and Twitter at This Film Is Lit, and Facebook.com/This Film Is Lit, or on Goodreads at search
This Film Is
Lit on Goodreads, because I don't know how that works. Oh, what are we doing next week?
Oh, well, we're doing the mini episode.
What's our next episode?
Our next
What are
main
we previewing?
Episode?
What are we previewing next week?
We are doing the classic children's film, Shrek.
Are we?
Yes, we are.
This is a surprise to me, guys. You heard it here first, along with me. I didn't know. I wasn't. I know we have a schedule, but a lineup, but I don't always look at it.
Yeah, I do that.
Yeah, you take care of all that, so I wasn't sure what we were going to... Fantastic. That one will be a little more lighthearted than this one. So yeah, next episode we'll be previewing Shrek. We also may be talking about some other, maybe Stranger Things. We finally finished that the other day. Maybe talking about Thor Ragnarok. Who knows? We'll have some stuff to talk about, so look forward to that in a week on This Film Is Lit. Until then, bye-bye. That's my bye-bye. You're adorable. Our Siamese is laying next to the table with his stomach, his big fluffy belly.
He has the world's fluffiest belly.
I just took a picture. You guys can look for that on our Facebook and Twitter page. Give you a good excuse to go check those out.